Welcome, esteemed viewers, to an epic journey through ancient history and biblical legends. After 7 years of brutal work, he wakes up to find a dark betrayal lying right beside him. This is the tale of Jacob, a cunning man facing bitter karma for past deceit in a strange land. Driven by deep love for Rachel, he traded his freedom for a grueling life of harsh servitude. But in the shadowy tents of Laban, a dark trap was waiting to test the true limits of his devotion. The weary traveler, fleeing his own sins, finally reached the lush and vibrant pastures of Haran. According to ancient texts, Jacob arrived with nothing but the dusty clothes on his weary back. He approached the great stone well, a bustling center of life where the local shepherds gathered their flocks. Then, beneath the golden midday sun, his eyes locked onto a vision of absolute, radiant beauty. It was Rachel, guiding her white sheep to the water with a gentle grace that stopped his very breath. In that singular moment, a profound and desperate love struck the heart of the wandering exile. He knew instantly that he must have her, but the harsh reality of his extreme poverty quickly set in. To marry such a noble woman, tradition demanded a heavy bride price that he simply could not pay. So, Jacob sought an audience with Laban, Rachel's father, a powerful and deeply calculating chieftain. Laban saw the raw strength in the young man and quickly sensed a highly profitable opportunity. The cunning patriarch offered a brutal pact, demanding 7 full years of unpaid, back-breaking labor. In exchange for this massive sacrifice, Laban promised the beautiful Rachel to be his rightful bride. Without a single moment of hesitation, Jacob accepted the grueling terms to secure his true love. Thus began the first long chapter of his servitude beneath the unforgiving, scorching desert sun. Day after day, he herded massive flocks across the barren plains, enduring intense thirst and exhaustion. According to historical accounts, shepherds faced deadly predators and violent thieves in the dark night. The freezing winter winds cut to his bones, while the blazing summer heat blistered his hardened skin. Yet, ancient records say that these 7 brutal years felt like only a few fleeting days to him. It was the pure, unyielding power of his love for Rachel that made the heaviest burdens feel light. Every stolen glance at her radiant smile gave him the immense strength to survive another brutal day. But hidden within the deep shadows of the camp, another pair of eyes watched his every single move. It was Leah, Rachel's older sister, a woman cursed with sorrowful eyes and a deeply broken heart. She loved Jacob silently from afar, knowing his fierce passion belonged only to her younger sister. Laban observed this tragic dynamic, and his greedy mind began to weave a profoundly wicked scheme. Would you sacrifice your youth for the one you love, or would the hardship simply break your spirit? Finally, the promised day arrived, and the entire nomadic tribe gathered to celebrate the grand wedding. Great fires roared into the night sky as the guests drank heavy wine and danced to the rhythmic drums. Jacob, intoxicated by joy and wine, waited eagerly in his dark tent for his beautiful bride. Laban escorted a heavily veiled woman into the shadows, strictly forbidding any light inside the tent. Blinded by passion and darkness, Jacob embraced the woman, believing his long wait was finally over. The night passed in a haze of fiery romance, sealing the sacred marriage pact under the silent stars. But as the cold, unforgiving light of morning pierced the tent, the ultimate deception was revealed. Jacob turned to kiss his beloved Rachel, only to find the sorrowful eyes of Leah staring back at him. A primal scream of pure agony and burning rage echoed violently across the quiet morning camp. He had been utterly betrayed, tricked into marrying the wrong sister after 7 years of literal slavery. This was the bitter taste of cosmic justice, the heavy karma for deceiving his own blind father. The great deceiver had finally met his match, outplayed by a man far more ruthless than himself. Furious and heartbroken, Jacob stormed into Laban's grand tent to demand an immediate explanation. The wealthy patriarch simply smiled a cold, calculating smile, entirely unmoved by the young man's fury. He coldly stated that local customs strictly forbade giving the younger daughter before the firstborn. It was a perfect, legal trap, designed to exploit Jacob's immense strength for even greater profit. To finally claim Rachel as his true wife, Laban demanded another full 7 years of hard labor. How would you react if the person you trusted most destroyed your life's dream in a single night? Defeated but deeply bound by his unyielding love, Jacob accepted the brutal, soul-crushing terms. He was allowed to marry Rachel a week later, but the massive debt of time hung heavily over him. Thus began the second cycle of his grueling servitude, far darker and more cynical than the first. The once hopeful young traveler slowly transformed into a hardened, deeply scarred, and weathered man. His youthful optimism was completely ground into dust beneath the relentless weight of the passing years. Meanwhile, a toxic, heartbreaking rivalry began to consume the peace within his very own household. Leah, though legally his first wife, knew she was entirely unloved and despised by her angry husband. She desperately hoped that bearing him strong sons would finally earn a fraction of his cold affection. Rachel, though deeply cherished by Jacob, faced the immense shame and bitter agony of being barren. The sisters waged a silent, agonizing war for his favor, tearing the family apart from the inside. Jacob stood in the center of this storm, a tired patriarch bearing the heavy sins of his complex past. For 14 long years, he bled for Laban's immense wealth, receiving nothing but deceit in return. Historical texts note how his legendary patience became a defining trait of his ultimate character. He learned the deep value of silent endurance, slowly mastering the vital arts of breeding and survival. By the end of his 14 years, the naive youth had died, replaced by a dangerously wise leader. He now understood that freedom could never be freely given. It had to be carefully and boldly taken. Through divine blessing and sheer cunning, he began to secretly amass his own massive, healthy flocks. Laban's greedy sons watched with growing jealousy as the former slave slowly became incredibly wealthy. The tense atmosphere in the camp grew highly toxic, like a dry forest waiting for a single, tiny spark. Jacob saw the dark, threatening change in Laban's eyes and knew his family was in terrible danger. It was finally time to break the heavy chains of his long exile and return to his forgotten homeland. But the perilous journey back would force him to confront the greatest, most terrifying ghost of his past. He gathered his wives, his many children, and his vast wealth under the dark cover of a moonless night. They fled into the vast, unforgiving desert, leaving the treacherous Laban far behind in the dust. The escape was a massive, incredibly risky gamble, as Laban's furious army would surely hunt them down. Yet, an even darker, more violent threat waited patiently for him at the borders of his ancient home. His older brother Esau, the fierce warrior he had cheated decades ago, was marching to meet him. Ancient records state that Esau rode with 400 heavily armed men, thirsty for brutal revenge. Jacob had survived 14 years of slavery, only to walk directly into a massive, bloody slaughter. He split his fragile camp into two desperate groups, hoping at least one half might survive the attack. That night, entirely alone by the rushing river, a mysterious, incredibly powerful figure blocked his path. It was not a mortal man, but a divine force that challenged the exhausted patriarch to a brutal fight. They wrestled fiercely in the mud and the shadows until the first faint light of the cold dawn appeared. Jacob fought with the desperate, unbroken will of a man who had already lost 14 years of his life. Even with his hip painfully dislocated, he fiercely refused to let go until he received a blessing. The mysterious being finally yielded, changing Jacob's name and completely altering his historic destiny. He emerged from that epic struggle forever physically crippled, but spiritually and entirely reborn. As the morning sun rose high, he looked across the valley and saw his brother's massive army arriving. The hardened former slave limped forward, completely ready to face the deadly consequences of his youth. His incredible journey from a fleeing deceiver to a tested patriarch was finally coming to an end. The brutal lessons learned under Laban's heavy whip had perfectly prepared him for this ultimate task. He bowed low to the dry earth 7 times, fully offering his neck to his deeply wronged older brother. Would the heavily armed Esau strike him down, or would blood prove thicker than decades of bitter hate? The tension in the hot desert air was completely unbearable as the massive warrior rushed toward him. But instead of drawing his sharp sword, Esau threw his strong arms around Jacob and wept bitterly. The cycle of deceit and violent revenge was finally broken by a profound act of genuine forgiveness. Jacob had finally returned home, not as a wealthy conqueror, but as a humbled and very broken man. His massive wealth and large family were the heavy fruits of his long, incredibly painful, and bitter exile. The legacy of his 14 years of slavery would echo loudly through the rest of recorded history. He became the historic father of a great nation, born from the intense rivalry of his 2 suffering wives. The story of his long struggle remains a powerful testament to the incredible endurance of human love. It proves that cunning deceivers cannot escape the heavy, unyielding scales of ancient cosmic karma. The long 14 years of bitter slavery finally came to a profound and heavy end in Haran. He had paid the ultimate, agonizing price for his deceitful actions against his own family. Through intense physical pain and deep trauma, the young wanderer finally became a man. Laban's cruel traps were meant to completely break him, but they only forged his unbreakable iron will. And from the tragic, painful rivalry of 2 jealous wives, a mighty future nation was slowly born. The legacy of Rachel and Leah would echo endlessly through the corridors of human time. True love proved to be the absolute strongest force, powerful enough to bend the heavy arc of fate. For every stolen blessing of his youth, the hardened patriarch paid back with his own blood and sweat. He walked away from the shadowy tents with massive flocks, leading his divided family back home. But the cycle of brutal deceit would deeply haunt the next generation of his own sons. Because a dark seed of jealousy, planted in the dry desert soil, always bears a deeply bitter fruit. This grand story stands as a timeless warning to those who dare to play cruel games with human hearts. The cosmic scales of divine justice will always find a way to balance out the sins of the dark past. Even the most brilliant and cunning minds cannot escape the heavy, sweeping storm of ancient karma. Remember the trials of Jacob next time you think a hidden lie will go unseen. His long years of painful slavery remain an unforgettable lesson, carved in stone. A tale of desperate passion, betrayal, and the undeniable power of redemption. Jacob paid 14 years for love, but was it a noble sacrifice, or just punishment for his past? Did karma finally catch up to the deceiver? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know. If you enjoyed this epic journey, please like, share, and subscribe for more historical deep dives.